Around 7 or 8 years ago, I built the most powerful computer I have ever built. And I used it once in 2013 in London Summer Jam for an outside broadcast on off-the-chart radio, which then closed in 2014, so that's why it sat on the shelf until the present day. Although actually at the time of recording, off-the-chart radio has returned. Since March 2020, it's been back as a pop-up station to get us through our lockdowns. Obviously I'm biased, but I'd highly recommend it, www.offthechartradio.co.uk. With loads of ex-DJs, we've all got back on board on a sort of rolling programme. And actually, the computer that sat on a shelf, well, it gave me the incentive to bring it out of retirement and put it through its paces, because it's the fastest computer I own. And yeah, it's just sat in a box on a shelf, doing absolutely nothing. So if nothing else, it would have been a good idea to get it out of the box just to check it still worked. And not only does it work, but it's a beast of a machine, at least compared to anything else I own. But it only had 4 gigabytes of RAM. And 3 gigabytes of that was being used just to keep itself going, really, because that's just what it was using on background processes. Maybe I could whittle that down if I tweak the settings, but I thought, well, why don't I do like I've done with every other computer I own and max out the memory? Now, lots of people, if they think there's like a ceiling on the amount of memory their computer can hold, that's a sign they need a better motherboard, a better processor. Yeah, okay. Fair enough, but for me, actually, it's really cool. I love the idea that I can take something up to the best it's ever going to be and know that it can never get better than that. Because, when you buy a brand new motherboard and processor, you're always having to compromise. You're having to get what you can afford rather than what you really want, in the full knowledge that in a few months' time it's probably all going to be cheaper. But if you wait a few months, then something better's out and you're always on this treadmill. This is brilliant. There's no treadmill anymore, no stress, no pressure. You pay a fixed amount, you get the maximum amount of memory it's ever going to need, and that's the best it's ever going to get, at least in terms of RAM. But also it's something really easy to do. And for me, I'm not particularly nervous about going into the innards of a computer. But that's not the case for everybody, and you might be a little bit afraid to sort of tinker around inside. Installing RAM is really easy, and it's something you can definitely do. You might not even need a screwdriver. In fact, you don't need a screwdriver inside the computer at all to put the RAM in. You may need a screwdriver to open the case, and that's it. The first thing you'll need to do is look up what motherboard you have inside your computer. Now, it was easy for me because I bought all of the parts that have gone into my computers, so they came in a box with the name and number on the box. But you may not have that. But you don't even need a screwdriver to do that. You can download this tool, which I'm going to show you now. So go into web and type in CPU-Z. That'll take you to this website. And once you've downloaded this, I'm going to download the Windows version, obviously, because I'm on Windows. It's free to download. You don't need to sign up to anything. You need to scroll down to this bit, setup, download that file, and then when it arrives, you need to click that button as well, and then I'm in the way actually. If I move myself out of the way, yeah, so you can see the file is downloaded there. So once you've downloaded that, installed it, and opened it up, you should see a window that looks a bit like this. And when you open it up, you'll see a load of information that you don't need. So don't let it put you off. All you need to do is go to the tabs at the top. You'll see here you've got CPU, caches, and then mainboard. Now, mainboard is another name for motherboard. If you click on that, then it'll tell you what your mainboard is. And up there is what you need, that name. So that'll tell you what you need to search for, because you may find that your motherboard only supports a certain amount of memory, so you need to make sure you don't go over that maximum amount. So the make of my particular motherboard is Asus Tech Computer Inc., although I can probably shorten that down to Asus Tech, and the model is the P8H61-I R2.0, and that R2.0 is important because different motherboards might have the same name, same model number, but they're a different revision of that model number. And yeah, the best place to go is the manufacturer's own website, so Asus in this case. So that'll tell you a bit of sales blurb. Yeah. Very interesting. Well, it was at the time I bought it. It's 7 years on now. Click on specifications, and you then be able to see what RAM it takes. So in this case, you can see it takes 2 times DIMM. Now DIMM is the name for, okay, I'll show off my acronym knowledge now. Dual inline memory module. That's just the name for the memory stick. Not Sony memory stick, that's a brand name, that's something else. Yeah, 2 times DIMM, maximum 16 gigabytes. So one particular website that I rely on for finding out what memory is compatible actually said I could have up to 32 gigabytes in this computer, but this motherboard doesn't support that, so it's worth just check the manufacturer's website, get it straight from the horse's mouth. Maximum 16 gigabytes, DDR3, that's the type of the memory, double data rate 3. Oh yeah, I know my acronyms. And then it gives you lots of speeds. Now I got confused by this myself. It's got this OC, and it's like, have they got a TV obsession? No, it means overclock. Okay, I knew that, but I didn't know how it applied. I was just thinking, well, but what does it mean? I don't really want to overclock it. So what I got was this memory, which is just at the start of this overclocking range, but I'm not actually overclocking it as far as I know. I'm just running it at 1333, possibly, I'm not sure. Anyway, but these are the memory speeds that the motherboard can support. Non-ECC is something to do with whether you've got a server or not. So if you've got a standard home computer, you won't have a server, and so you actually want non-ECC memory, so that's fine. Don't think you're losing out on anything, you're just losing out on it not working, as ECC memory won't work on your computer. So one of the websites I use is crucial.com, and so you can go to that by visiting uk.crucial.com and then scroll down to select computer, and what you're going to do then is put in the information you found out. So in this case it's going to be an Asus motherboard. Oh, where's it gone? Asus. I know some people pronounce it Asus. I never pronounce it Asus. P8 H61i, and as you see there, the R2.0 version is there. That's important. Submit my search, and what that will give you, okay, you've got a choice then, memories or solid state drive. In this case I'm looking for memory, so it'll give you a list of all the memory that's available. So here we've got an 8 gigabyte stick of memory. Again, there's another acronym, UDIMM, which UDIMM, DIMM, DRAM, RAM, all means RAM. Okay, obviously it's got a different meaning for each one, but as far as you're concerned, for simplicity, it's RAM. So it's got different options there: 4 gig, 8 gig, or it goes on to SSDs then. Or 16 gig kit is what I got, but not at that price, because that was quite a lot more than I've ever spent on RAM. And before I was saying about how cheap it was to do this, let's look at another website. So here's another website I've used myself, mrmemory.co.uk, and you can do a similar thing here. You can type in the make and model, H61i, and as you can see, the motherboard, that's the motherboard there. So yeah, total memory slots 2, maximum memory 16 gig. So that's actually correct. Wherever I was looking at it before that said 32 gig was wrong, and this is correct. So again, you've got different options. A bit about the warranties. Actually, you've got different size options. They're all the same type of RAM available on this site. Yeah, so that's one way of doing it. But I actually shopped around a little bit more once I knew what I was looking for. And if you feel confident going into the actual data here, and you know what you're doing, then you can get it a little bit cheaper than that. Actually, a significant amount cheaper than that. In fact, the memory I'm going to show you now is really fancy memory. I mean, I never would even bother with memory like this normally, but it was cheaper, much cheaper than anything I could find online which didn't have all the fancy stuff. But before we have a look at this RAM, I just wanted to go back a step, because I'm aware that what I just said made it sound like some sort of humongous, impossible task to be able to work out what these numbers mean for yourself on the motherboard specs. But it's not really, it's just that these numbers need a lot of demystifying, and there's a lot of numbers that you don't need, but there's some that you definitely do. So let's start off with 2 times DIMM, right? So 2 memory sticks that you can fit in your computer. And so that meant that I had a look at these 2 times 8GB kits. And I eventually bought a 2 times 8GB kit. The only thing to note here is that Mr. Memory offers you 8GB, 4GB and 2GB. And so the price that you see there will be half of the price that you need if you want to fill the slots completely on your motherboard. And yeah, you can't do things like, you could buy 2 8GB sticks. You can't buy 4 4GB sticks, or at least I can't for this particular motherboard, because there's no room for 4 sticks, there's only room for 2 sticks. So don't buy more than what you need. Do check and make sure. The other thing then is just to buy the right RAM for your motherboard. This motherboard takes DDR3 RAM. Crucial recommended DDR3 RAM. Mr. Memory recommended DDR3 RAM, and not surprisingly I bought DDR3 RAM. Before DDR3 there was DDR2, before that there was DDR, and now there's DDR4 and DDR5. So it's not a random number, you just need to make sure it matches what your motherboard can support. And that's pretty much all you need to do. The confusing thing to me was this OC stuff again that I mentioned earlier, and I thought that the OC meant that the RAM would be overclocked, or the motherboard would somehow overclock itself in order to support the memory. Now that's not right, actually, I've realised in retrospect. The motherboard can support all of these speeds of RAM. All of them. Every single one of them. It's just that when this motherboard came out, the only way to support 1600 MHz RAM was to overclock 1333 MHz RAM, because that was the only RAM that was out at the time, I'm guessing. Whereas the RAM I bought is natively 1600 MHz RAM. So that's fine. The motherboard supports 1600 MHz. Crucial actually recommended 1600 MHz RAM, although it said it in a slightly different way. In fact, it said it in 3 different ways, which is a little bit unhelpful. But that 1600 just corresponds to 1600 MHz. There's this other confusing number in here where it says PC3 12800, PC3 10600. These are just different ways of saying the same thing. In Mr. Memory's case, it was 1333 MHz RAM that they were offering there, and PC3 is because it's DDR3. 10600 is because it's 1333 MHz RAM, but you can pretty much ignore that. It's just another way of saying the same thing, and it's not really necessary as long as all the other numbers match up. One other thing to point out is just this, CL11, and the memory I bought was CL9. So that did cause me a little hesitation, because I thought, what if my motherboard doesn't support CL9? Because CL11 is being recommended by Crucial. That was actually the wrong thinking. CL9 RAM is actually better than CL11. CL stands for CAS latency, and latency is sort of a measure of how slow the RAM is, and a higher number means that the memory is slower because it has a higher latency. And yeah, the internet's not very clear. It doesn't really give a very clear answer about this, but the worst comes to the worst. If you have a CAS latency that is better in the memory than your motherboard can support, then the motherboard will just drop down, or the RAM will just drop down rather to what the motherboard can support, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. But it makes more of a difference if you've bought 2 different sticks where the CLs don't match, although that's not really an issue with me because I've bought a kit with 2 sticks that are exactly the same. And again, if you bought the kit from Crucial, you'd get 2 sticks that are exactly the same, and you just have to be a bit more careful then with Mr. Memory that you buy 2 sticks that are exactly the same, but they were only offering 1 type of memory stick anyway, so you couldn't really, in this particular case, accidentally buy 2 different types. They'd send you the 2 types that matched because you ordered the same memory, if that makes sense. Maybe one more thing to point out, Mr. Memory says 240 pin DIMM. That's not hugely important. They're all going to be 240 pin DIMMs if they're DDR3 and they're PC memory, but it is important, I suppose, to look out and make sure they're not accidentally buying laptop RAM for your PC, because the laptop RAM will be considerably shorter and definitely won't fit. And yeah, it would be a bit nasty if you ended up spending quite a lot of money on memory that was completely wrong, and other parameters may match, but it's laptop memory. In this case, it was absolutely fine. I went onto the website and it was clearly, to my eyes, PC RAM, because it's a lot longer. If you look at laptop RAM and PC RAM side by side, it should be fairly obvious which one's which, but of course that's me talking from a point of view of knowing fairly well what the inside of a computer looks like and what RAM looks like. So if you want to reassure yourself, just have a look to make sure on the specs, and actually having a look at the website where I bought this RAM from, it says 240 pin RAM, so yeah, it's definitely the correct RAM. But then these other numbers are things that, I mean, the voltage it runs at, great, it runs at 1.35 volts. These numbers apparently are to do with the chips. I mean, I guess the chip one. So 1024 meg is the amount of RAM that's on a single chip, that you know, the actual chip on the RAM stick, and 64 is the bus width. Well, fantastic. Again, these numbers, if they're of interest to you, you're probably not watching this video because you probably don't need my help to install RAM, and you know, you already know what you're doing if you're delving into what voltage compatibilities. You know, no, that's way beyond even what I was looking for. I pretty much ignored those numbers. I'm not trying to eke out every last drop of power from this computer. I'm just trying to give it a RAM upgrade. And let's be honest, quadrupling the amount of RAM that my computer had is going to have much greater an effect than any tweaking of voltages or anything like that. I'm not going to bother with that. So let's have a look at this RAM then, and I have to say 20 out of 10 for the box. Now, retail packaging has never been anything that's particularly bothered me or interested me or influenced me, but this felt really nice pulling out of the packet, and it made me feel like I'd leveled up somehow. And a sticker, I've never had a sticker with RAM before, so yeah, I'm going up in the world. But as I say, you know, this was just much cheaper overall than the other sticks I'd seen, which didn't have these fancy pants heat sinks on them anyway. So you know, you can't not getting something for free. Maybe there's a case for cooling RAM as well. I mean, from everything I've read online, you shouldn't really need heat sinks on RAM. It's not renowned for getting particularly hot. But I did upgrade my old PC and got some strange problems when I had the 2 sticks of RAM in, which went away when I put some extra case cooling in. So maybe if you've got bad airflow in your case, heat sinks won't do any harm. So I think we're almost ready to put this new RAM in. I just wanted to show you something first. And I'm showing you on a photo of my motherboard rather than the real motherboard because, as I hope, and I'm sure you'll understand, I didn't really want to unplug everything from the inside of my computer just to show you a clear shot of my motherboard. But also, I'm talking about this being a really easy process, and you shouldn't have to, unless you're particularly unlucky, you shouldn't have to unplug anything to put RAM into a system. I managed it in my mini ITX case without unplugging a single thing, though I did have to be a little bit more careful just sliding the RAM in, as you'll see in a second. But yeah, the thing to have a look for is this notch here, and most memory has like a sort of short section and a long section with a notch. I'll show you on the RAM that I took out again, because there's the RAM that was in there, and all you need to do is make sure that you line that notch way up with, and you won't be doing with the picture, so it'll be a little bit easier. Just line that notch up with the notch in the slot. The other thing to watch for is that because I'm used to there being 2 of these hooks that they're like clips that you can push out of the way, I'm used to there being 2 on a motherboard. Now in my case, and maybe in yours as well, depending on your motherboard, this side isn't a real clip. It's white, the same colour as the other side, but there's no clip there. It's just painted white for aesthetics, presumably. I don't know if it's painted, coloured white for aesthetics. So I was pressing down both sides and thinking, oh great, one of the clips is stuck. No, it wasn't. It's just the left-hand side one wasn't a real clip. On the right-hand side was where the actual clip was. So when you see that in the video, the only reason I take so long over it is because of that. Now, I have tried to edit this video so that everything plays in the order in which I actually did it, but in this case, I've gone back in time a tiny bit. This is the old RAM stick still in there that I just showed you, and me struggling with the clips because I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have to stop this in a second. I can't even master the clips. What's going on? What's happened to me? But it's just because, yeah, one clip wasn't a real clip, which I only realised afterwards. But you've also got to remember, this RAM has been in there for 7 years, so it was quite stiff to get out as well. But yeah, it came out eventually.
And there's the old RAM out. So we need to get the new RAM prepped and ready to go. And as I said before, you just look for that notch that's on the RAM and make sure that notch is lined up properly before you press down. I've never ever broken a RAM stick. I broke an SD card once, pushing it into a slot, and I didn't push it in that hard and it snapped it off. And amazingly it still worked afterwards, but that's another story. Anyway, this RAM, yeah, I'm having to sort of slide it, and as you can hopefully see, I've got an inset picture there on the top left, which is just showing you a sort of side-on view, but it's not entirely helpful sometimes because my hand's in front of the camera. But you can slot the memory in, you know, and slide it in from the side, and that should work. Again, I'm just checking the notch is in the right place before I apply any force to this, especially because it's slightly more than I have spent on previous RAM. You know, the cost of the RAM shouldn't make any difference. You don't want to break it, regardless of what it costs. But once you're certain it's in the right place, push it down. And you're listening for that click. Now, of course, I'm used to there being 2 clicks because I'm used to there being 2 clicks. There weren't. There was only 1 click. But yeah, you just firmly press down once you're certain the RAM is completely vertical and that notch is lined up. If anything feels wrong, just pull it out and start again. But once you've got the first one in, the second one's easy then. You've had some practice. And again, you're listening for that click. There we go. And just give them a wiggle just to make sure that they're in securely. And the next thing really is put the case back together and cross your fingers. And of course it may help to plug everything back in first and then make sure the power is on. But yeah, switch it on and one of 2 things is going to happen. It's either going to go beep, 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 which means that the RAM's not in properly, or you're going to end up with everything working absolutely perfectly. I just pressed delete to enter setup just to check what was happening, and also because it's always nice to see after a RAM upgrade your RAM just at a ridiculous size compared to what it was before. And yeah, there you go, all done. So I really hope you found this video useful, and I'm really happy with the results. It's not so much that it's been a massive speed boost. When I put new RAM into my old PC, I noticed a real difference in speed. In this case, it was already a much faster computer. Even though it's an old computer by today's standards, it's still a beast compared to everything else I've got, as I mentioned before. So the speed is about the same. It's just a lot more stable, and it's capable of running a lot more at the same time at that speed. So if you're doing this for yourself, yeah, it's more of a feeling that the computer is more stable. I haven't done any benchmarks. I'm sure I could throw numbers at you, but they'd be relatively meaningless to most of us who don't benchmark computers against each other. It's just a feeling that, yeah, everything's a lot more stable. It's using the hard disk less. Remember that the system only had 4 gigabytes of RAM before, 3 gigabytes of which was being used just for system processors. So really there was only 1 gigabyte for any programs I wanted to run. And so, well, what's the difference now? We've got 16 gigabytes. If 3 gigabytes is being used for system processors, I've got now 13 gigabytes of RAM. So in a sense, it's not so much quadrupled the RAM, it's made it 13 times bigger, the usable RAM that I've actually got, and it's made a real difference. Obviously, if you run out of RAM, as you may know already, the temporary data that the computer needs to store gets stored to the hard disk, and the hard disk is a lot slower to send data back and forth to than RAM is. So the more RAM, the better. And at the time of recording this, as we're all in this lockdown, it may be a really convenient, relatively cheap way of giving your computer, you know, whether you're using it for hobbies or whether you're working from home or both, as I am in my case, it's just a way of giving it a bit of a new lease of life, and you don't have to worry about buying or building a new computer necessarily. You may be able to get a lot more out of what you've already had, either sitting around on a shelf inexcusably, like in my case, or what you've got that you're using every day. You just want to give it a little bit of a boost.